I thought I would work on the purple piece a little bit today and do a little bit of a Susan ramble. Let's see, and what I think I'm going to do here are some more feather stitches just to kind of bring this together over here. And I wanted to answer a question that somebody had asked me recently, and she asked me what had inspired me to start writing and when I stopped. And there's a lot of stories all tied up in there, so I'll just address one. If you don't already know, before I decided to focus fully on my art, I wrote children's books, and I wrote all kinds of things actually, but I published a lot of children's books, a lot of them for the educational market, so you won't find them online, possibly at a used bookstore. And I did a lot of things for the educational market. I did a lot of articles. I worked for newspapers. I did all kinds of writing. And the thing that got me started, the very first book I ever published was a young adult romance novel. And it wasn't here in the United States. It was actually published in Germany. And how did that come about? I was reading adult romances, probably because I was a young mom and looking for the escapism that many of us do. And I don't even really remember where the young adult stuff came from. Probably I had gone to a writer's meeting and saw people talking about it, and it seemed like it was something that I could get into. How did I get started writing in the first place? Well, I was an only child and grew up, my mom and I lived with my grandparents. So it was just me and my mom. My mom and dad were divorced before I was born. And so I lived in a neighborhood where there weren't a whole lot of kids around. And my mom worked all the time, and my grandmother was always busy doing, household stuff. So I got really good at keeping myself entertained by telling myself stories. I loved to read from a very young age. I would always escape with the characters in books or make up stories about things we would watch on television. And I would pretend that I was actually, part of the cast or the family that was being portrayed, High Chaparral or Bonanza, that I was this long lost, daughter that was going to show up on there. So I was always a storyteller, and from school, I took lots of creative writing classes, and it was just one of those things that came easy to me that, I always knew that I enjoyed stories and characters, but I never thought about it as a career. I got married right after I graduated from high school, had kids not long after that. So I was a stay-at-home mom, and I tried like a whole lot of those home party plans, not Tupperware, but they were like Tupperware. And I tried a bunch of them. Never was any good at it because, of course, I wasn't doing something that I was passionate about. I was doing something because I felt like I needed to fill that void of being a young mom. I wasn't obsessed with being a mom. I enjoyed being a mom. I enjoyed taking care of my kids, but there was that missing. I didn't understand enough. We didn't study ourselves back then enough to understand that I wasn't feeling fulfilled, and I didn't know what was missing. So I was walking around the block, my baby in a stroller and a friend's baby in her stroller, and we were walking around the block, and this friend was telling me about her job. She was an animal trainer at one of the animal parks, and I was fascinated because I had always been a big animal lover. And it wasn't that I wanted to be an animal trainer, but I was fascinated because she was so excited when she would talk about what she did. It was the same kind of excitement we got, when the kids were doing some, milestone moment. She turned over, she started to walk, whatever it was. She was that excited about her job. And I couldn't relate. It was just like, it was foreign to me. The whole idea of it was completely foreign to me. So she asked me, she said, you're doing all these other things, these home party things, and they're not making you any money, and you're not having a good time. You look kind of miserable. She said, I wonder what your dream job is. What would you do if you didn't have to worry about paying the bills? And it was funny because I had never in my life thought about being a writer. But as soon as she said that, I said, well, that's easy. I'd write books. And she said, well, I don't understand why you're not doing that now, because you're not making any money at the things you're doing. You're not having a good time. Your husband's got a good job. He pays the mortgage. You've got food on the table. Why aren't you writing the books that you want to write? And that made perfect sense to me. Why wasn't I doing something that made me happy? Now, here it is a lot of years later. I wrote 23 books, I think, and I don't know how many hundreds of articles, and I taught writing all over the place, and I taught writing in prison. I taught writing via correspondence school. I did all these things because I loved to write, and I continued to write as long as it made me happy. But until she asked me that question, what would you do if you didn't have to worry about paying the bills? It never dawned on me that what I would do every day with my life when I wasn't taking care of the kids and I wasn't making dinner and I wasn't doing the grocery shopping, what I would do with my time should be something that makes me happy. How crazy is that? I was in my 20s and I was miserable. Except for my kids, I was miserable because I wasn't doing something that was going to make me happy. And as soon as I started writing, I grabbed a little steno notebook, because this was way back before the days of computer. And I would grab my little steno notebook and I would write this down by hand, and then I would transfer it to my word processor. And that's how I wrote my first few books. It's funny how I forgot that lesson that my friend had asked me, what would I do just basically if it was going to make me happy? I had never thought about living my life from a place of joy. And then for a long time, I forgot about it. I mean, I wrote and I published and I taught, and it was some of the toughest, best, most rewarding work that I have ever done. But somewhere along the way, I forgot about the joy. And it took a lot of time in art, and some time in therapy, to find that spot of joy for me again, and to realize that I should be living my life from a place of joy, that life is better, life is more joyful if I'm working from that place. It isn't easy to look for the joy sometimes. And if you're one of those people that has to do unfulfilling work in order to put food on the table, I'm sorry. I understand. I have been there, done that, spent my time on food stamps, spent my time working jobs that I absolutely hated just to be able to pay the rent on my crummy apartment. And I'm not there now, but I have been there, and I understand. And I still think in the middle of all of that, I was doing creative work. I was writing. I was selling my writing. I wasn't using the writing to pay the bills, but I was using the writing to feed my soul. So I think even if your days are bogged down with health or family or really icky job stuff that stresses you and says that you can't do all the creative work you want to, I still think you can find pockets of time. I would spend my lunch hour writing in my little notebook, and then I would have an article that I could send out to a magazine. I would go to work a little bit early so that I could use the quiet time in my cubicle to get some writing done. You can find pockets of time to do your creativity, whatever it happens to be. I just don't ever want to forget about coming to my creativity from a place of joy. And if there ever comes a time where art is not making me happy, if I'm not having a good time, whether it's making a YouTube video, making an Instagram post, or just doing any kind of stitching, I'm not going to do it anymore, because life is too short. Being creative should be fulfilling, and that's going to give you something that you can't buy with a paycheck. I don't know. That's my 2 cents. I hope you have pockets of time in your day that you can do something from a place of joy. And if you're not having a good time doing it, go find another way to be creative. If you don't like to stitch, or you don't like to do watercolor, or you don't like to do ceramics, that's not the kind of stuff you should be doing. It's good that you try stuff. Try it all. But only keep doing the stuff that makes you happy. Life is too short. That's all it's about, right? Life is too short to do the things that don't make you happy unless for some reason or another you have no choice. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. I'm just going to keep creating my brand of stuff, whatever that happens to be, whatever makes me happy in the moment. And I hope you are too.